I do wonder about what unanimity gives you when he has made very clear that the risk right now is to the labor market and not the fight against inflation. I mean, he signaled that pretty clearly at Jackson Hole. And so to have someone, not in concert, signifies to me either that they don't think the labor market as important, which would be upsetting, I think, to a lot of people, or they're signifying that he hasn't gone far enough. And they tend to, I think, kind of close ranks and come together around the big decisions to let everyone know that this economy is being steered, in concert.
So if we consider what he would have to personally message if the move is 50, because there is a narrative out there that a move of that size could signal panic, that they are seeing something that the rest of us might not be yet, that there is more reason for concern in the economy right now. So how important would his messaging be, frankly, in either instance, to explain why they felt the need to front load or not to front load?
Yeah, and I worry that if the message around 50 is, or the message around 25 would be, well, we just didn't want to play into market expectations, or we didn't want to think that people were panicking, of how much is the message around what other people will be messaging versus what the economy needs. And I think what I've seen in Powell over the years is that he tends to be very plain spoken about this was what the economy needed right now. And if we messed up, we messed up. If we went too low in the past, we went too low in the past, but it's about meeting the needs of the moment.
If we said transitory
and we were wrong, then we were wrong. And I think a lot of people were expecting a cut. Last time they met, they didn't do that. So it is very possible for him to say, this is just what the economy needs. It's not panic. It's prescriptive, and this is good.
It's not panic, prescriptive. How about politics? This is the politics program. We'll hand things off to the market experts in about 5 minutes. Does he need to be deliberate about this issue?
I mean, I think the narrative is kind of forcing his hand there to say that this, they can't take an election into account. I kind of think of this as making a little bit of the James Comey mistake, working so hard to look like you're not in support of one person that you actively start supporting the other. You overcorrect. I mean, that's not a word that the Fed really likes, overcorrecting, but that it's definitely a possibility when you're trying to take into account politics. And what I would say is economics is hard enough. There's no need to bring politics into this decision.
So if politics don't factor into the actual outcomes from the Federal Reserve, that's not to say that what the Federal Reserve decides to do doesn't affect outcomes in politics, right?
Absolutely.
This is a decision that they're going to be making weeks ahead of a presidential election. So I guess the question is, to what extent do you expect that the actual beginning of the easing cycle will influence consumer sentiment if it is coming simultaneously with a slowdown in the labor market that might be felt first, knowing that even eased policy might have a lagged effect kicking in?
I mean, most people's impression of the economy is what they experience in their day-to-day lives. And whatever they read in the newspaper or see on the news, it's still just how secure they feel. Can they afford a home? Can they find a job? So I think, yes, the narrative that you can spin some type of narrative of like, oh, and here's D.C. conspiring to help. I mean, people are going to say that. And then they're going to say like, oh, he didn't go far enough because they want to help Trump. I mean, that all of that is possible. I think the real question is, will people see an improvement in their lives? And if they don't start acting in the labor market's best interest soon, the answer to that is almost certainly going to be no.
If you're Kamala Harris, though, you're hoping for a psychological impact today. This is a good headline. I don't know to what extent she'll message that. Was one of the conversations we were having earlier. But how about in terms of a material improvement for consumers? This is a short period of time.
It's a short period of time, yeah. Maybe there's a mood boost to this, but it's 165 million workers in a pretty large economy. You don't get to take really dramatic right or left turns. And frankly, we don't want the economy to do that. I mean, we want to be on a steady path, and that can be really frustrating for people who want relief immediately. Just to say it's going to get better soon is cold comfort. So maybe people start cheering about how well the economy is doing, and that makes people more mad because they still haven't found their job. It's so hard to predict how an individual will internalize this great big economy that they participate in.
Well, and of course, one of the most immediate transmissions might be in mortgage rates in the housing market. This is selfish coming from me as I'm in the process of trying to buy my first home, and I'm like, rates go as low as possible, please, right?
Get down.
But that's where the dot plot will come into play, because those will start moving even before the cuts come if the expectation is there that rates are going to go materially lower.
Yeah, I think that if we can get built-in reductions to the mortgage rates, to get the housing market unlocked, to get people to be willing to sell their homes so that you can buy one, hopefully it's a great place. Can you just list off the specs that you're looking for here, and we'll telegraph that right to Powell. I mean, there's lots of relief coming, but I think sometimes we get a little bit upside down thinking in elections about what does one person want versus the other, and it's always helpful to remember that the housing market has been brutal for so many Americans for these past few years, and any type of movement, however it affects the election, is good for our economy, for people to feel confident that they can do something that they see as so fundamental as buying a home.
Should Kamala Harris today take credit for winning the war on inflation? It's the first cut. We finally made it.
That would be so foolhardy, but I would never put it past a politician not to take credit for something good.
I feel like her opponent might do that.
Yeah, well, that's different, right?
Well, I guess so. Finally, before we let you go, we just have a minute left. There's also the consideration of fiscal policy always, that the Fed doesn't have influence on, but they do have to react to. If we actually see the policy proposals, frankly, from both of these candidates coming to fruition, there's an argument that they would be inflationary and maybe cut this cutting cycle short. Do you agree?
Yes. I mean, we haven't seen, a lot of fiscal responsibility telegraphed from either candidate. We've got record deficits right now. We're not at an active war. We're not in an active recession. Deficits should not be this high. We have sabotaged our ability to collect sufficient revenue from the federal government. And at some point, we are going to need an adult in the room say we are not raising enough money. They're not going to say that 6 weeks before an election, but someone needs to say it.